Good afternoon, and I'm welcoming today His Grace Chaitanya Chandra Prabhu, who I have known for since about 2006, so that's about 18 years. When I first came to Dallas, he was one of the first devotees that I saw there, and he's remained a friend and supporter ever since. And I've been inspired by his different preaching activities throughout the years, and his wonderful family, which he'll probably talk about later on. So, welcome to Tanya Chandra Prabhu.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, then. So. Let me take you back a little bit. Where do you come from? Where's your family home? Where was you brought
In
up?
Central California, a place called Santa Maria,
Okay.
California. It's about 180 miles north of the LA Temple. It's behind Santa Barbara, and then there's a few small towns, and then Santa Maria. So I grew up there, uh, and I was adopted. My parents adopted me and my other sisters, and lived in a really nice, my father had some businesses, he owned a couple of gas stations and had a big rent-a-car franchise and a big mechanic shop and a whole bunch of tow trucks. And so we lived in like the big one of the big neighborhoods next to the country club and across from a really beautiful park. And so, we didn't have any financial problems at the time. Uh, Grew up, going to the Episcopal church. I gotta turn my ring off. I'm gonna keep disturbing. I'm not sure how I can turn it off from it without messing the screen up here.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Okay, we can
um,
hear you okay.
yeah. All right. So anyway, later on when I was like in sixth grade, my parents got a divorce.
Oh,
So we were
sorry.
just my father left with some other lady, and he moved to British Honduras and gave the whole big mansion property and everything to my mom. And then, but it was too much
Mm,
maintenance and all that kind of stuff. So she sold it for a bad price, and we bought a nice little three-bedroom, two-bath house in a more suburban area.
mhm.
And then my dad passed away when I was like, I think seventh grade.
Oh,
He
wow.
passed away. He got sick. He got typhoid in Malaysia, typhoid and malaria, and he passed away like he had like a heart attack or something. I was either in seventh or eighth grade. I can't remember exactly. So he was gone. So it was just me and my mom and my sister. And then eventually my sister, the eldest sister was already gone. Next sister moved out shortly after. So it was just me and my mom. So uh, one day we lived kind of close to my high school, and I was a sophomore in high school, and we would spend a lot of time at a friend's house, which was even closer to the school, right on one of the main streets,
Hmm.
coming down from the school. And one day we were over at his house just eating and hanging out, playing pool or ping pong or something. And all of a sudden, somebody says, "Hey, come look at this." So we all come running over to the big window, and there's this brahmachari with an orange robe on and a shaved head. We'd never seen anything like that before. So we're all gawking through the window at this brahmachari. And the brahmachari had come with other brahmacharis, with a couple other ones, and with the devotee from that neighborhood who decided to come back to the neighborhood. His name was Keshava, and his brother was he was a famous book distributor and preacher, and his brother was Karandar, who was the president of LA and the GBC for a long time. So Keshava came with these other brahmacharis, and they were distributing back to Godheads. So they didn't come to the house that we were gawking through. But later on, I went back to my house, and the brahmachari knocked on my door.
Oh,
So I didn't really, I was a sophomore in high school. I didn't really have any money. But he had a BTG, and I gave him like a quarter or something. I don't know. I gave him some little donation, and I don't even remember if I had the magazine or not because I don't remember seeing it. But he may have given me a magazine, a BTG. So anyway, that was when I was a sophomore. Then that was the first and only time I'd ever seen devotees. And then when I was a senior in high school, uh, Keshava himself, who brought that Sankirtan party to his neighborhood, he came to visit his old friend who was like his neighbor named Jim. I can't remember Jim's last name, but Jim was like he was like in his 20s and we were just high school kids,
Yes.
right?
He was
So
old. Yeah.
he was our alcohol supplier.
Yes.
We'd pay him and he would, all the kids would, because we'd all have parties and drink, and so he was like the alcohol guy. So anyway, so he came one time. I was at his house, at Jim's house. He was giving me guitar lessons, and all of a sudden, this Mercedes pulls up just off to the side of the front of his house, and Jim freaked out. Jimmy Lee was his name. He freaked out, and he thought, "Oh my God," because he used to be a drug dealer in Hawaii. So he thought these guys were coming after him because it was an expensive car. Turns out Keshava was in charge of Prabhupada's car, and he drove Prabhupada's Mercedes to the house there. So, I went out to, check to see who it was, and then so his name was Kerry Smith, Keshava, and then we found out who it was, and it was cool because it was his old friend. So he let Keshava stay in one of his bedrooms, and so then Keshava, he had brought a suitcase, one of those old brown suitcases full of Back to Godheads, Bhagavad Gita's, japa beads, nectar devotion, Sri Upanishads. He had a whole preaching kit in this semi-large suitcase. So we used to hang out with him, and he used to hang out with us a little bit, and we'd go and play softball together, and you know, sometimes engage in some of our little nefarious activities together. And I was always like totally intrigued by Keshav because I'd never met anybody who was so deep like he was. He was very intellectual, very deep, and I couldn't understand him at all. It was like he was a mystery to me because he was a devotee, he's been a devotee for, at that point, he'd been a devotee since like 68, and it was 75 then. So, or late 74, 75, I forget exactly what month. Anyway, so one day I was doing some yoga in Jim's backyard, and Keshava saw me doing, and I was pretty limber. I was,
Mm.
18. And I was an athlete. I was a competition swimmer and water polo player and surfer. And so I was really loose. And he goes, "Wow, you're really good at that yoga stuff." He goes, "Do you know anything about the history or philosophy of yoga?" And I said, "No." And he goes, "Well, do you want to know anything?" And I said, "Sure." So then he brings me into his room and he pops open the suitcase with all these beautiful books and beads and all this stuff. And we had like an all night conversation.
Oh, wow.
And I came out of there chanting japa and a vegetarian. I was kind of inclined towards being a vegetarian because I had a crazy experience because we used to go hiking in the mountains near Santa Barbara up these rivers. And the way we would eat is we would catch trout, we'd catch fish in these mountain stream. So one time I caught one and it was a little baby one and it swallowed the hook. I was trying to free it, but I could see I was causing it a lot of pain because I had just slipped and hit a rock on my knee, and my knee was swollen like a basketball. It was like just enormous, and I could barely walk. So I'm in pain, and I'm seeing the pain of this fish, and I was like, wow, I'm really causing this entity pain, and I was already in pain. So I was kind of already, meditating on not eating meat, but I didn't really understand much about it, but I didn't want to kill. I didn't feel like killing was a good thing.
Yes.
So anyway, so then I became a vegetarian really easily because in California I was eating avocado toast with sprouts and tomatoes and simple stuff, it was pretty easy to become a vegetarian. And I started chanting. And I would just chant wherever I drove, wherever I went, go to the beach and just chant everywhere. And then George Harrison's My Sweet Lord came out,
Okay.
and we used to listen to My Sweet Lord all the time. So I'd be chanting and chanting everywhere. And it was really amazing, actually, just chanting, just kind of, no hard and fast rules there, just chanting. And then one day he calls me from, I forget where he called me from, but he said, how's it going? How's your chanting? How's everything going? I said, it's going really good. And he goes, do you want to get more benefit out of your chanting? I said, absolutely, because it's already been amazing. And he goes, okay, now then, follow the rest of the regulative principles. And he didn't even tell me the regulative principles beforehand. It was just don't eat meat and chant Hare Krishna.
Mm.
So then I said, oh, that's no problem because I was a single guy. I wasn't doing anything, didn't really have a job. I just worked part-time for a friend of mine's dad. And so I was just, pretty irresponsible high school student, senior year. And so I started chanting 16 rounds and following the four regular principles. And up until that time, he had given me Bhagavad Gita and Sri Upanishad, Nectar of Devotion, and a Back to Godhead. But I couldn't read the books. It was too impenetrable. It was like just foreign language. I used to look at the pictures now and then. But as soon as I started, following the principles and chanted 16 rounds the same day, I got inspired to pick up the Gita. I guess he told me to read the Gita or something. I can't remember. But I picked it up and it was like Krishna just turned the whole Gita on. It was like all of a sudden I could read it. And before I couldn't even comprehend any of it. It was just
Yeah.
too foreign. So every day I was spending hours. I'd chant and then spend hours reading the Gita, and then go visit my friends. We had a neighborhood with about 10 guys and about 5 girls, and we used to all hang out and party together. And so I'd go up there to see my friends during the day after I read Bhagavad Gita, and I'd tell them all about what I was just reading, and I was excited about it. It was liberating. The Bhagavad Gita was so powerful. I was just like, wow. The first time in my life I had heard anything that was the truth. It was so clear and so amazing. And I just felt liberated. So I had to go and talk to them about it. And I mean, the first thing was in the end of the first chapter on one of the purports, Prabhupada's describing, of course, right before the second chapter, he starts talking about how we're not these bodies and how we're not going to die. I had no idea that that was a reality. I was confused. I didn't know whether I was going to die or not die when I died. You know what I mean? I didn't know that there was, because, my gurus were the musicians and the singers, and there was some atheistic rock and rollers who didn't believe in anything after death. And so I was kind of confused by the philosophies of the musicians. So when I heard the Gita and it's like, you're not going to die, you're not this body. And I was like, that was like so liberating. It like lifted all the stress from me completely. Just that one thing that
I
I'm not the
remember,
body.
yeah, I remember reading that as well when I was I don't know, about no, I was about 15, 16. You were not, all your kins, you are none
Yeah,
of you will live or die. And that verse there. And
yeah,
I felt similarly, I thought, wow, and all these stresses of being a teenager, a young girl teenager, you've had a daughter, so you know all the
yeah,
things we go through, and just lifted away. It gave me so much security and peace just to know I was eternal and I wasn't going to die. I was going to continue on after this.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
I
Big
just
time, big time. That was like the first stage of being liberated, in that sense, to
yes.
have the knowledge. Yeah, yeah, that's what it was. And then just like maybe the same purport or a few purports later, Prabhupada starts to talk about what is happiness and how to become happy. And there he's talking about watering the root of the tree versus watering the leaves. And all we have to do is chant Hare Krishna and serve Krishna and please Krishna to become happy. And I was like, wow, there's another total liberating revelation.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, we're killing ourselves trying to be happy. We're taking all these different intoxications, racing motorcycles, racing cars, going to these beaches and these big waves and almost drowning sometimes, and, just doing stuff because we don't know what to do.
Mm.
So that was the second thing. I was like, oh my God, being happy is possible. It was like, I didn't know that you could be happy because everything was just such a hit and miss type of situation, where my friends and I would sit around, and on days where there was no waves at the beach, we'd sit around and say, well, what do you want to do today?
Mm.
And somebody would say, I don't know, what do you want to do? And then the next guy would say, well, I don't know, what do you want to do? And then the next person, there were like six or seven of us sitting there, we're like, I don't know, what do you
No,
want to do?
no,
Nothing. Let's just go
no.
get high then, because there's nothing else to do. So let's go smoke some pot or whatever.
Yeah, to try
So
and find some
we were
happiness.
like, there was nothing to do to make you happy. It was just an endless path of frustration and, non fulfillment growing up, especially because we're in high school. We have all this energy, and we didn't know what to do. So when I read that, then that was like a second giant liberation. It was like, oh wow, okay. Now all I have to do is chant Hare Krishna, which I was already doing, and I was already feeling happy from that. So it was like, yes, confirmation. I have to just keep chanting. So then I would go and tell my friends all this stuff after I would read like a chapter, two or three. I don't know. I would read for hours, and then with all this revelation, I'd go talk to my so-called best friends, and I had two really close friends, and one of them, at one point, after maybe a week or something of me reading and talking to them about it, because we're all just party guys. He said, you know what? He said, I've had enough of your Krishna stuff. Just don't talk to me about it anymore.
Oh
And I
no.
was like, wow, this is so cool because I just read how shallow all the mature relationships were. Because I'd read Nectar Devotion after the Gita and I was reading so many things. And I was like, wow, that is so true. This whole thing is so shallow that my best friend just told me to shut up and stop talking about Krishna consciousness. And I was like, wow, this is wonderful. So then after that, I decided to, well, Kesava came to see me. Well, what happened was he was on the Radha Damodara party with Tamal Krishna Goswami, and they were traveling, and they had been in Washington State, and they were doing these programs at universities, making kids devotees out of the colleges and taking them and putting them on the bus. So they had several people that had quit school and joined the bus, Drista Das and, oh man, Vidyananda were the two guys that I knew that were kind of like my age that joined just like a week and 2 weeks before I came. So he came to Washington and said, why don't you drive up here? And I just wrecked my car. I got into an accident and I couldn't drive my car. So then he came to Oregon and said, we're in Oregon. I said, I'm still, my car's, I can't have the money to fix my car, so it's just wrecked. So then he came to San Francisco, and I said, okay, I'll just fly up there because Santa Maria was like a 45-minute flight to San Francisco or something. It was close. It was like $26 for a ticket.
Okay.
So I decided to fly up there, and Kesava picked me up from the airport, and I had never seen him wearing a dhoti before. And he was a pretty big type, stocky, not fat, but a big guy. And he had, short red hair, which was like an inch tall. And he had on a sleeveless kurta and a dhoti that was really like too short for him. So he picks me up from the airport, and I'm looking at him like, wow, what a difference of appearance. And then I was like, as we're walking through the airport, we meet some other book distributor in the airport. who was this really nice devotee, but he was really, 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 really skinny. And when I saw him, I was shocked. I was like, man, this guy doesn't look healthy. Because I
Mm.
was an athlete, you know?
Yes, yes.
So I was like, man, this guy, I was kind of like shocked by his presence because he was too skinny. I'd never seen anybody that skinny before. Maybe I had, but it just surprised me. So anyway, he took me to the temple. We went and saw the deities there, but I wasn't conscious of the deities. I went in the temple room and Jagannath was there, and but I wasn't really,
Mm.
aware of that, any of that yet. And then he took me on the bus to meet Tamal Krishna Maharaj and Visnujana Swami, who were the two
Mhm.
Bhakti leaders of the Radha Damodara party. And Tripurari Maharaj happened to be there because he was selling books in San Francisco at the airport, but he was on the bus too. And so Keshav and I come on the bus and meet Tamal Krishna Goswami, and they were having a little kirtan when we walked on the bus. There was this devotee named Chaitanya Vallabha or something. He was playing the drum, and I was like, wow, because I liked drums. I wasn't a musician, but I liked drums. And I was watching him play the mridanga, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj says, "Oh, do you like that? You like that instrument? It's called a mridanga." And I said, "Yeah, it's really amazing." He goes, "You'll learn how to play it." And I'm like, "Cool." Which I did,
Which you
shortly
did,
after I started
yes, because you
learning.
play well. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, so then we stayed on the roof of the San Francisco temple because it was summertime. It was like May or something. It was around my birthday, or maybe it was before that. Anyway, it was around that time. Yeah, it had to be around May because we went to see Prabhupada in LA. So then we took off. We took a bus. We just left without telling anybody. Took a bus to my house, and then I got rid of all my stuff. Sold a bunch of stuff, gave a bunch of stuff away. I had guns and my surfboards and
Wow.
all whatever stuff I had. So I collected enough my motorcycle. So I collected enough money to buy a cheap car from my friend's dad, an old Ford Cortina station wagon, like a four-speed station wagon. And so then he and I drove to LA to see Prabhupada. And I
Wow.
shaved my head before I left. I used to have long blonde hair because I was a surfer and we
Yes.
were all into the surf look. So I had long blonde hair and I shaved my head and I went to go see all my friends before I left. And they were like all shocked because we were all into our hair. Like we all had our own identity was our hair. So we all had this special hair identity. So they were all like totally blew their minds when I shaved all my hair off except for my Sika.
Mm.
And anyway, we ended up going to LA to see Prabhupada. We got there a couple of days before Prabhupada did. And so the LA temple, because Prabhupada had been there so many times, and that was like his headquarters in America. So they had just redone the temple room to the one it is now. It used to be in where the Fate Museum is, and they had
Yeah.
just renovated the current temple room. And everybody, I mean, it was a beehive of cleaning and fixing and painting, and it was just really, really active. So I was like really impressed by the total anticipation everybody had of seeing Prabhupada. It was like they're getting ready for something I had never couldn't even conceive of how they were so intensely getting ready for Prabhupada to come. It was like I'd never experienced anything like that. It was like, what are these people all so excited about? It was like the excitement was just off the charts, and it was like, and everybody was so busy. So I had shaved up and I was wearing a dhoti, and anyway, then they were giving classes about Prabhupada. So one of the old devotees was giving class about how the pure devotee, because that's how everybody talked about Prabhupada. He was the pure devotee. That was how he was talked about. So we're like, the pure devotee is so powerful that they have all mystic powers and they can even create planets at will. All these things are described in the different perfections described in the Nectar Devotion, right? So they were this devotee was talking about Prabhupada, and it was like, wow. And so somebody got up and challenged him.
Mhm.
during the class about Prabhupada. And I don't remember the exact reply, but he gave such a wonderful reply that the person surrendered and became a devotee right on the spot. He like joined just from hearing the strong argument of Prabhupada. So it was really an exciting thing getting ready for Prabhupada to come. So I could see I could see that how excited everybody was, and I had no clue who Prabhupada was. I mean, I read his books, but I had no idea what he meant into everybody and their relationship with him and everything.
Oh,
So then the time came when he arrived, and so there was like I think I rode in some school bus or something devotees had. We were like there were hundreds of devotees had come to the airport to see Prabhupada as he arrived. It just took over the whole place, had a massive kirtan, and I was just kind of staying out of the way because I was new. I didn't really want to. I didn't, have any idea what was going on. I didn't have that relationship. I didn't know anything really. I had only been a devotee for 2 weeks. Actually, only a week. Really, I hadn't really even joined the party yet. I had just shaved my head and had been chanting for, a few months. So I didn't really, and I didn't know anything. I mean, I did want to join when the one thing about the Bhagavad Gita was when I got to the 10th chapter, I was like, wow, if there's people that live the way this book teaches, I want to live with those people. I
yeah.
had that determination. So anyway, so I get to the temple and then Prabhupada arrives and it's like this overwhelming reception and just everybody was so much enthusiasm. It was just I had never seen anything like that at all. So then Prabhupada came back and it was that famous lecture where he says, my spiritual master said if I ever get money to print books, so kindly help me to print as many books in as many languages as possible. It was that famous address that's on some of the Acharya movies in different places. So that was that time. So Prabhupada, described how, our movement is very easy. We don't have to concoct anything. We don't have to create anything. It's already there. All we have to do is follow the predecessor Acharya. It's a very famous address. And of course now I've listened to it so many times but
Mm.
back then I couldn't really follow exactly what he was saying because
Yeah, it's because of his
in
accent.
the next classes his accent was there, and then during the next morning, the Bhagavatam class, he was quoting so many Sanskrit shlokas because that's what he was doing. He was always referencing the books
Yes.
when he was speaking. So I would be listening, and then he would quote some verse, and I was like falling behind because I couldn't tell what was going on exactly. Then I realized he's saying the Sanskrit language of the verses. So
Yes.
then I was like a few sentences behind.
Mm.
So it took me a while to catch up to what he was actually saying. But anyway, then I think it was the second day after the class Prabhupada gave. Then I'm standing out in the front of the temple with my dhoti on, and there's some other new bhakta, I can't remember his name. And Jadharani came up to both of us and said, hey, we're on this special service marathon to print the Chaitanya Charitamrita. That was the time when they did
Okay.
the 17 volumes in 2 months.
Mm.
So we were standing there. She goes, are you busy? And I said, no, I'm just hanging out. She goes, well, I need you guys so I can take some pictures of you posing so I can paint these pictures in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. And I was like, cool,
Yes.
whatever we can do to help. So she took a bunch of photos, ended up using two of them that I can remember. There could have been a third, but there's the pastime of Lord Chaitanya embracing Vasudeva the leper.
Yes, 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 yes.
Reaching down, I'm Lord Chaitanya in that, and the other bhakta was Vasudeva. So I'm Lord Chaitanya in that one, and then the other one was when Lord Nityananda was meeting with Raghunath Das Goswami, and Raghunath Das was offering obeisances to Lord Nityananda, and he was putting his foot on his head, and they're
Mhm.
in the forest. So right next to Lord Nityananda, there's this sadhu holding a cane with his arms, and that's me holding the cane. So I got to do a little seva for the Chaitanya Charitamrita
That's
in that
wonderful. So
sense.
you're
Yeah,
famous.
so that was
Actually,
sweet.
that painting of Lord Chaitanya embracing the leper, I used that for His Grace Gayatri Prabhu for one of his albums. It's called
Mm.
Rescue Me. And so I used that for for his CD and that.
Oh,
Yes, yeah, for the picture for that. Well, that is unusual, isn't it? That's a
yeah.
wonderful pastime that you had that to do. I was wondering if, because you mentioned how you were, all these young devotees were being picked up at the universities, and they were joining the buses, with Tamal Krishna Goswami and the other devotees there. But I wondered, do you think that's something that we could do now? Do you think we could still go out or do you think things have changed now? Do you think we can still attract young people like that, young men, to come and
Yeah, I think so.
get shaved up and
I mean,
immediately?
there's devotees traveling and distributing books at universities. There's a few parties of devotees, Parameshwar and some other ones, and they're going to colleges. And of course, some towns are more receptive than others, but they're already finding the young people because when you're that age, you naturally have questions, you
Yes.
know? And of course, the society is completely different back then. It was like people were strongly looking for an alternative lifestyle back then in the 70s because of the hippies, because of the Vietnamese War and all the different factors. Everybody wanted some other alternate lifestyle. Me and my friends, we wanted to like go just get away from the city and go live in the mountains somewhere. That
Mm.
was our idea of, getting away from because a lot of our friends, older friends, had been drafted in the Vietnamese War, and we were like, we were not into that whole thing. So at that time, there was a lot of, the hippie movement was happening and all the music that was, going on. And so the young people were more open to alternate lifestyles. So it was very successful.
Mm.
But the potency is the same that like Visnujana Swami, my first service as a bhakta when I finally went back to San Francisco from LA. My first service was to play the tambura while Vishu John Mars is playing the harmonium, and then there's a madranga player, a kartal player, and an esaraj player. So he taught me how to play the tambura. So I was up there on the stage as a 1 week bhakta, right? I just got back from LA. That was a whole story too. Just coming to San Francisco is a whole nother story. But so I was there and I didn't even know the songs,
Yeah.
Govinda Jaya Jaya, Gopala Jaya Jaya, all Vishnu Mars' sweet tunes. I was just pretending to sing because I didn't know the words to any of these songs until he was singing Hare Krishna. So then I would sing. But yeah, so I mean, what would happen is he would be singing and he was really absorbed. I mean, they the absorption level of their kirtan then with Vishujan Swami and everybody was so potent. It
Mm.
was really, really wonderful. So what would happen is many people would come to the kirtans and listen to the kirtan. They'd sit in front of the stage. They were on a stage. So they would sit in front of the stage, and then Tamal Krishna Maharaj and my bus leader Brahmadas and Keshava and some other devotees would go and they would look to see who were the ones who were absorbed in the kirtan,
Oh,
right?
okay. Yeah, yeah, yes.
And then they would go and talk to those people, and then they would convince them. They were like, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was like a closer. He was like a salesman for Krishna, and he would like convince people so amazingly that I remember the one day that I was out there, I remember he brought back somebody, and I think he got initiated. His name was Paramatma Das, and he brought him back, shaved him up, became part of the Bhakti program right just from the audience in San Francisco. I think we're in front of the chocolate factory, possibly. There's two places, the Wharf and the Ghirardelli chocolate factory that we used to chant at. And so anyway, that's what they were doing at the universities. They'd go and have kirtan, and the kids would come, and they would be grabbed by the potency of the holy name, and then they would look to see, obviously, who was absorbed in the holy names and preach to them. So that, that's always
Mm.
something that is, to me, uh, something that attracts people is the holy name. And then the philosophy, because a few years later, back in the mid 80s, I was traveling with Sridhar Swami in Tamal Krishna Maharaj's motorhome, and there was a few of us, Yadavacharya, myself, Purnachandra, and Sunanda, I think. And we stopped in Austin, and we set up this preaching. We had all this paraphernalia to like displays, and we used to set up and do kirtan. And as the thousands of students would come across this big crosswalk to go back to school for lunch, they would come back and forth to go out and eat and stuff. So we would be set up there. And I remember just watching as I was behind the book table, listening to the kirtan and watching how every single person that walked by got touched by the potency of the holy name. They were making faces and they were determined to not even look at us, right? They were like, these guys from Mars are over here singing something, and they had this look like they didn't want to like even acknowledge that we existed, right? But before they could get past the vibration, they all like relaxed and looked. It
Mm.
was like you could see that the potency of the holy name hit every single person. So, and I used to have, when we used to do kirtan there, um, I remember because we were right next to this huge crosswalk. It was like 100 feet across crosswalk. So some people would be listening to the kirtan as they're waiting to cross the street, right?
Okay. Yeah, yeah.
They'd be standing there and they'd close their eyes and just listen to the kirtan, and the light would change and everybody would walk across and they'd still be standing there. Sometimes two of them, and through the whole thing, sometimes for two lights, they would stand there and just be absorbed in the chanting. We used to have people come and listen for hours, and they were very receptive. So I think the Holy Name festivals, I think that's still a possibility.
Mm.
I don't see that it's not a possibility because everybody loves the potency of the kirtan. It's very, very powerful all the time. So
Yes,
yeah,
yeah.
I kind of think that it's still a possibility. I don't see any change in the potency of the holy name. It's the same. And as long as the devotees, like, I mean, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was a serious preacher person. He was not a lightweight person. He was a very serious, intelligent devotee, servant of Prabhupada. So, he was convinced. So he was convincing. So when the kids heard him speak and the others, they became convinced. Because Krishna consciousness is the perfect philosophy. We're not these bodies. We're spiritual beings. We're not happy because this world's temporary. It's actually simple to get people's attention on that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
So I think that Krishna, whenever we do something to go out and preach, my experience is if we're there, Krishna will send people
Yes,
for
yeah.
us to meet.
That's
The
true.
super soul will direct them there, and they'll meet us, and then they'll get the books and get to hear something or whatever. So I'm always in favor of like, yeah, let's, if you can do it, then do it. Why not do a Harinam festival, attract people, distribute prashadam? All this stuff is so powerful that it
Mm.
wakes up the soul. It wakes us up. It awakens our devotion to Krishna. We're already devotees. So we're not trying to like just sell something to somebody
Mhm.
that's artificial, or we're not trying to make money off of it. We're not selling anything. We're just awakening people's Krishna consciousness. So I think that, even though it's a completely different time, I think that it would still be effective if we had the people to do it.
Yes, yes. Lots, yeah,
Back then there was tons of brahmacharis and everybody was single and,
yes.
you know,
Because
we had a lot of manpower.
everyone is married now, really. It's more grahastas now, isn't it, rather than brahmacharis and brahmacharinis or grahastas. Take me then back now to your initiation then. How did you get your initiation? Because you saw Prabhupada that first time in Los Angeles.
Yeah, so then Tamal Krishnamars, I got to go on a morning walk even with Prabhupada there in LA. It
One.
was interesting because I was standing by my car and Prabhupada left to go, and only a certain people could go on the morning walk.
Mm.
So I was standing out by my car with Keshava, and Brahmananda had missed his ride with Prabhupada. So he comes running out and he sees me standing by the car and he goes, "Is this your car?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "Let's go." And so Keshava and he jumped in the back seat. I drove, and Brahmananda got in the driver's the passenger seat. "Let's go. We got to go to such and such, Santa Monica Beach or whatever it was." And it was right after Mangalarti, kind of. So it was still a little bit, it wasn't quite light yet. So he's like, "You got to hurry. Run the lights. Don't stop at the lights. Just go because there's no traffic. Just don't worry. Just go. We got to catch Prabhupada, right?" Because he was late. So then we finally get to wherever the place is, the parking lot above the beach. And this is all being recorded by Prabhupada's secretary. So Prabhupada gets out of his car with Tamal Krishna Maharaj and everybody that's going to be on the walk, and he goes, "Where's Brahmananda?" And Tamal Krishna Maharaj says, "Well, Prabhupada, maybe he wasn't feeling very well this morning. I don't know because he wasn't dancing much in kirtan this morning." So then all of a sudden I pull into the parking lot and Brahmananda jumps out and Prabhupada says, "Oh, he's coming a second car." So Brahmananda runs down to Prabhupada and Prabhupada says, "So, you're late." And it was like this fun. He was having fun with Brahmananda and everybody there because he was late, and he wasn't there. And it was just this very jovial exchange. And Brahmananda goes, "Well, Prabhupada, you left like 10 minutes early today." And somebody else said, "Yeah, we did leave a little early." And Prabhupada said, "No, you were late because I left and you weren't with me. So you're late. Doesn't matter what time it was. It matters when I left." He didn't say that, but that's what he was inferring. So anyway, then they were joking and talking about clocks in Calcutta and how things were. Anyway, so then they started the walk. So I was just the new guy, right, with the car. So I got out of the car and Prabhupada's bodyguard, Rakshana, who was old friends with Keshava, I get out of the car and he stopped. He said, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "I'm nobody." And then Keshava got out of the car from the other side, and he and Rakshana were good buddies. So he said, "No, it's okay. He's with me." And he goes, "Okay, you can come then." So I got permission from the bodyguard from Rakshana because Keshava was there, I got to go on the walk. So I just stayed behind, and it's a wonderful walk. I've listened to it many times.
Mm.
And then, so then shortly after that, Tamal Krishna Maharaj uh, told me to drive back down to San Francisco to join the Bhakti program on the bus. But he didn't want me to go my normal way, which is to go Highway 101, which would go right past my hometown. He told me to go through San Bernardino and go through the desert and go that way because that way I would avoid the temptation of going back or blooping or whatever.
Going home.
So I drove the car and he was going to come with me. So, but at the last minute he backed out, which was really Krishna's arrangement because my car broke down a couple times on the way there. So I was driving and all of a sudden the steam starts to come out of the radiator. And so I stopped at a gas station. We figured out the radiator cap was worn out and steam was just coming out because the seal was no good for the radiator. So that worked for a while. And then something else happened. Then the gas pedal stopped working. And back in the old days, there was this linkage to the carburetor
Hmm.
which the gas pedal controlled to open the carburetor to let more gas in so you could speed up or whatever. So that linkage had broke somehow, fallen apart, part of the, and I couldn't find all the parts. So I wired it together
Yeah.
to where it was wide open, the gas,
Oh,
and I had to drive with the key. So I got it going. It was a 4-speed. I got it going full speed. And then when I wanted to slow down, I just turned it off. And then when I wanted to speed back up, I'd turn the car back on. So I'm driving for like at least 2 or 3 hours with the key.
I've never heard of doing that before.
So that was it was pretty crazy.
That is crazy.
And I was driving really fast because I was like,
Yeah.
there was no traffic. By that time, it was like almost like midnight or something. So there wasn't many traffic. So I was just driving full tilt, 90 miles an hour into San Francisco, and the directions he gave me were really good. So I made it to the temple and had a really amazing divine revelation when I got to the temple door. It was like, wow. It's like I've never had anything like that before. I had this experience that all of a sudden I could see my lifetimes and how they were like dominoes falling down and like an infinite number of dominoes falling down, and the last one went right in front of the temple door. So I was like,
No.
wow, it's like maybe this is my last life because that's the way it looked. So anyway, so I got there, I went join the Bhakti program, and Vishujan Maharaj would give us morning walks at the beautiful Golden Gate Park, and
Mm.
Tamal Krishna Maharaj, they were giving us all kinds of gulabs and blueberry halava and really good prasadam and wonderful training. And so we stayed there for a couple of weeks, and then we went to Denver to see Prabhupada. So my Bhakti program was like 2 weeks. Then uh, went to Denver to see Prabhupada, stayed there for maybe close to a week, and then went from there to Chicago.
All right, Chicago. Yeah.
So that's where they had the big initiation, the whole Radha Damodara party, like 100 people got initiated. And so when we got there, Tamal Krishna Mars, that's when they installed the 4 sets of the Gronatai deities for the buses.
Hmm.
And so when we got there, uh, I guess Prabhupada was there. And then he told me that we're doing it in Tamal Krishna Mars said, we're doing it, Prabhupada's going to have an initiation, and you should take initiation. And I was like, okay, I was a new guy, right? 3 weeks. What did I know? I said, okay, whatever you think. So then in the meantime, we're going on Sankirtan collecting money to give Prabhupada for Dakshin, and we're spending time, the whole party's there cleaning the temple, getting it set up for the big sacrifice, because 100 people. So we had a few fire jug areas,
Okay.
several it was a pretty big temple room. I don't remember how many particular sacrifices there were, but there was a few with maybe 20 people sitting around the fire. So anyway, so we're there, and nobody told me anything. I'd never seen any initiation. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't really know anything. Nobody had coached me to like, okay, here's what's going to happen. Here's what you do. So, and I was the very first person they called up.
Oh, yeah.
So I didn't know. I had total stage fright. You're up there with Prabhupada,
In
and there's
front
so much Shakti there because Prabhupada was there, and the temple is so much spiritual potency. Then when I walked up to Prabhupada, I was like, it was like they have this powerful transcendental stage fright, you know? And so I'm standing there in front, and Prabhupada says, so what are the 4 rules? And I'm like, oh my God, what rules is he talking about? Because I just read the Nectar Devotion, and there's so many rules there, right? And I was like, in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't know what he's talking about. I don't know which rules he means because nobody told me he was going to ask me
No.
those questions. I didn't know what initiation was. I had no clue. It's totally green. So then Brahmananda Maharaj comes walking over to me and he says, so do you know what he's talking? I said, I don't know what he's talking about. And he said, he said the four rules, but he said the four regulative principles. I said, oh, no gambling, no intoxication, no meaning, no illicit sex. He goes, he knows him, Prabhupada. And then Prabhupada, Prabhupada, your name is Chaitanya Chandra Das, and the whole room erupted with like jives because he had just installed these Gauranatai deities.
Oh, okay. So
And
you
I
was
was, and I, and I
after.
was the very first one, and I
Yes.
got this great name. So it was like everybody exploded, and I couldn't really even hear what he said. It was like such an explosion of jives, and everybody was so happy that I had to wait until, a couple hours later to find out what my name was from Tamal Krishna Goswami. So anyway, we all sat down, he initiated everybody. It was a long ceremony. And then so that was that. And then we had a giant, beautiful feast. The kirtan was after the initiation. It was amazing kirtan because the place was packed. You have to understand, when Prabhupada came somewhere, whoever was around that area would come from hundreds of miles because Prabhupada was there in Chicago. So many people from all over the country came. So the kirtan and the festival, it was like this giant festival. And it was packed with devotees, right? So they made this beautiful feast. I remember the cauliflower subji with curd, and I remember at the end, Drista and I had a full plate of strawberry halva as dessert after we already had like a ton of prasadam. And then we're sitting there, and one of us, I don't remember who, had the idea that, oh, you remember we fasted all day today, so all the maha sweets are still on Radha Damodar's bus because they offered a whole bunch of Visnujanmars to make these beautiful sweets, rasgullas, burfis, this, that. And he had so many sweets. So he and I went down there and we stole the maha from the bus. And a friend of ours who got initiated, Drisha Krishna, he had a pickup truck with a camper shell on it.
Okay.
So we crawled over the tailgate. We could barely crawl over the tailgate because we were so stuffed full of prasadam. And we just sat back there and ate this whole big thing of maha sweets, Mongol sweets. So we're back there just intoxicated, laughing for hours, just eating sweets and talking. So that was kind of like the conclusion of my initiation. And then we got divided up on the buses. And Tamal Krishna asked me to go on this devotee Brahma Dasa's bus. And I wasn't happy because I was like, well, I like being on your bus because he was such a sweet, it was so amazing being with him and Visnujana Swami. It was like they were such powerful devotees, such wonderful devotees. But I said, okay, I'll surrender, it's no big deal. But I wanted to stay with their bus, but I ended up going on Brahma's bus. And then we, started going to different parts of America. And we had like four vans, maybe Dodge vans. So we would go out and do Sankirtan from the bus to some town, some parking lots, some grocery stores, wherever, and then distribute books and then come back and do the morning program on the bus. And then after some time, we would travel away from the bus for the week and then come back just for the Sunday feast.
Oh.
So that was really wonderful. We lived for the Sunday feasts because it was like this amazing prasadam.
Mhm.
We always have glubjamins and glubjamin throwing contests where you stand, you toss and catch it in your mouth,
I knew, yeah.
and then you stand
And
a
all
few
the
feet back and do it
syrup,
again.
syrup
Yeah,
all over your face.
yeah. So that was like a really blissful, eating glubjamins to your heart galore. It's like to your heart's content having glubjamins. That was like one of the special treats. So, on the buses, it was really wonderful. The kirtans and the classes, and then our position was we were like little soldiers of Lord Chaitanya's and Prabhupada's Sankirtan army. So we took it very seriously. We'd get up and chat around seriously, and we'd go out all day on books, like from 9:30 till 9:30 at night or something like that. We would go out all day and go out and try and distribute books. And then at some point, we had all small books. We had like Easy Journey, we had Beyond Birth and Death. We had small books. And then at some point, the big books started to come out. So Tamal Krishnamaj, of course, he was famous for getting lots of books. So we would fill the entire bus. So you couldn't even get in the bus. You had to crawl over the books to get to where the deities were. And then we'd fill our vans up. And I remember the first day, we were all on the bus. When we got back, only one devotee named Jagat Shaka, I think, he distributed three big books. Maybe one or two other people distributed a book, a big book. And we were like, wow, you distributed three books? How did you do it, you know? So then we all talked about it and how exciting it was to go out and distribute books. And then they made this new policy. Every time you distribute a big book, you get a glubjamin.
Oh,
We
yeah.
were like, yeah. So it was like that. We're all young guys, right? And we all love prasadam. So that was for me, that was a big motivation because I really love gulabs. So I was like, okay, now I'm serious, you know. Yeah, so that was a very inspiring time. And then gradually we learned how to do it, you know, learn how to distribute more books. It took time, but we gradually learned how to do it. And one other time that I remember a lot of times, but at one point, Prabhupada was disappointed that we weren't distributing enough Back to Godhead magazines.
Okay.
So Tamal Krishnamars bought like whatever they had and distributed them with with the buses. I don't know how many, at least 50,000. I don't know. There was a huge amount he bought. I can't remember. Maybe it's written down somewhere. But anyway, we all had this Back to Godhead marathon. So they made a special condition. Whoever distributes the most Back to Godheads gets the entire noon maha plate with all the Mongol sweets. And I was like, oh, they just said the magic word, maha prasadam. So I
Yeah.
was like, okay, I'm gonna distribute so many of these that I'm gonna definitely win this marathon, right? So that day I distributed like 400 and something Back to Godheads.
Oh,
So I won the marathon, I won that maha plate. That was like, so we were highly motivated by prasadam, you know,
yes.
and we come back for the Sunday feast, which was always amazing. Sunanda was the cook for a while, and his cooking was totally wonderful. And then Apurva was one of the cooks. All these really good cooks. So we always just looked forward to the garanga potatoes and all the different wonderful preps. And it was like that was our motivation. We go out and distribute books all week and come back and have a Sunday feast. So it was really sweet. The Radha Damodara party. And then after a while we just started traveling, without coming back to the bus.
Yes.
We'd just travel and then we'd go somewhere to pick up books. They'd ship books to locations and we would go and just pick them up and fill our vans with the books and then just so then we no longer met up with the buses. So that was a wonderful time of learning how to depend on Krishna on Sankirtan. Because
Yes.
you would go out there and interact with people, and a lot of people are saying no,
Mm, mm, mm.
so it crushes your false ego to not be accepted. So then you had to really dig deep and try and become humble to realize Krishna was the doer, that the super soul was in charge, and we're just trying to offer these books and not be attached when the people would say no or be too elated and think that we get the credit for when they said yes. So the Sankirtan book distribution was a very deep psychological process of understanding how to surrender to Krishna.
Mm.
So it's very, very, and we're all going through the same thing. All the book distributors and all the Sankirtan devotees. This was the psychology, was how to surrender and be humble and depend on the Lord versus taking credit ourselves. And
Yes. Yes.
so it became a very ecstatic. It became a very wonderful service in that way because we all were forced to learn how to surrender because unless you surrendered, nobody would buy books.
Yes, that's right.
If you were too whatever, had the wrong attitude, then you couldn't sell books because people would just pick up on your wrong attitude and they wouldn't stop. But
Mm.
then when you had the right attitude, then people would stop and they would like, do I know you from somewhere? You know what I mean? There would be like a spiritual connection with people when we were in the right mood and the right enthusiasm and everything like that. So it was a very powerful to me a way of understanding how to, try to surrender to Krishna through
Yes.
the book distribution process.
You
And
should.
it was always a challenge because it was hard for
Yeah.
me because I was proud.
Yeah.
I was a little more proud than other people, so
Mm.
I had a bigger chip on my shoulder, so to speak. So it was harder for me to be humble. But through the process, had a lot of amazing transcendental experiences, which were you can't compare them to anything. It was just the potency of sometimes distributing the book. Krishna would like appear there. You couldn't see him, you could feel his presence, and it would be so transcendental that it was just like wow. So we had all these amazing experiences, seeing how the super soul would send somebody to take the book and how wonderful the whole experience would be. So
Yeah.
it became a very and to this day I'm like, I realized that Krishna consciousness was truth and that Lord Chaitanya's being empowered and you know, empowerment is a real thing, a transcendental thing. You have to experience so many different uh, opportunities to try and surrender and have some amazing experience. Krishna would give us these amazing experiences. So that kind of solidified you know, my life in the sense that I knew it was all true. All these things are true because I experienced so much stuff, so much transcendental nectar on Sankirtan. So, and so yeah, so the Radha Damodar experience was very, very good.
And you
And
continued distributing books ever since, haven't you? Because you're always distributing books.
yeah, now I got health issues, so I haven't done much. But yeah, in El Paso, we
So, yeah.
in 2021 and 22, I was overseeing the book tables.
Yeah.
I got lots of donations. I got like the
Mm.
first year, I got like maybe $3,000 worth of books donated, and the people there were so sweet. I got a whole bunch of my god brothers to come, like 7 or 8 of us, all distributing books. And right in the prasadam line, there's this huge line of people coming to get prasadam. So they were all sitting ducks.
Yeah.
We're all like talking to them, calling them over, distributing books to all these people in the prasadam line, and they were such sweet people. And all the devotees sold tons of books. Next year, I got more books. I had probably $5,000 worth of books, but I didn't get as many distributors as the year before. But we
Yeah.
still had quite a few, and we didn't have the big lines anymore because we organized the prasadam so the serve out was a lot more efficient.
Yes.
But we still sold lots and lots of books. I mean, probably it's at least the same amount as the year before, a couple thousand at least. So that was really, yeah. So distributing the book, and I told the book distributors, I said, listen, don't worry. I said, all of you are normally, you know, persons who our method is to distribute the book and get a donation. I said, we're in El Paso. It's a very poor place. It's a border town. It's like Brownsville. It's
Yeah.
like a border town. A lot of people don't have much money. They're coming here. I said, listen, I have so many books. They're all paid for. I
Mm.
said, just please don't worry if you don't get a donation. Let them have the books anyway. I
Yeah.
said, and in fact, and so I was bringing cases and cases of books as they were running out to everybody and just saying, hey, I'd rather have El Paso get the books, all the people, and not really. So some people were like, well, we need donation. I said, look, that's cool. Get a donation. But if you can't give them the books anyway, if they're interested.
Yes. Yeah.
So we ended up, that was kind of my philosophy because the books were already paid for.
Paid for.
And
That's.
I wanted the people to have the books because if they read the books, then they can
Mm.
have that option to surrender to Krishna if they read the books.
Yes, that's
So
right.
I've tried to distribute books my whole life. And
Yes,
I was in the restaurant in Kalachunji's for 16 years, starting back in '82. So one of my first services was is to give tours of the temple room because the restaurant was so busy. When we opened it up, it became instantly popular because it was like the only vegetarian option in town, right?
yes, yeah, at that
So,
time.
yeah, and Sunanda was the cook who was this phenomenal cook. He had so much bhakti, the prasadam was blowing everybody's minds. All the food editors were saying, if you come to Kalachandji's, drop your stereotypes, bring your appetites, and expect a spiritual experience. That was the headlines of some of the food articles, stuff like that, you know. We couldn't even make that stuff up, you know. So we're getting all these amazing food editor reports in the major newspapers and magazines. So the restaurant was getting busier and busier. So then we had to stop the Bhagavad Gita class in the evenings because we had nowhere to put all the people that were waiting in line. So we decided, Tamal Krishna Maharaj decided we should give a tour to the groups of people. And then by the time we were done, we'd talk about all the paintings and all the transparencies and the deities and Prabhupada. And we had a changing body exhibit there with all of our books to